Strange things are happening on the Earth with something that influences every region of this planet: the weather. Two storms hit the Indian Ocean coastline of northern Mozambique and southern Africa in one season in a space of 6 weeks in 2019, something never seen before, the worst recorded storms in the history of the Southern Hemisphere. Was it a natural disaster, or was it man-made?
Have you ever had a storm like this in this area? I've never heard or seen anything like it, she said.
And why did it hit a region that has the world's biggest ruby and sapphire deposits and one of the world's biggest untapped offshore gas fields that displaced thousands of people, affected millions, and weakened the little-known Islamic insurgents who, since 2017, were attacking petroleum contractors of the multi-billion-dollar liquefied natural gas project of Anadarko Petroleum Corporation in northern Mozambique. Iran, also called Persia in Western Asia, has the largest offshore gas field on Earth, and its economy is dependent on its hydrocarbon sector. It has been threatened with war by the United States, as well as economic sanctions, more than any other nation in history, that has crippled its economy, caused many to get sick and die, halved the value of its currency, increased inflation that has also increased the cost of living, the rise in food prices that has cleverly caused many of the civilian population to riot and turn on its government, and countries and corporations are being forced by the United States Secretary of the Treasury to not buy or sell with Iran, which in turn has affected the global oil market.
Trump gambles the world economy on shutting down Iran's ability to sell oil overseas.
Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves in the world, and in 2018 ranked behind only Canada and Saudi Arabia as the largest importer of oil to the United States. And, like Iran, nations, banks and corporations are also being pressured to not buy or sell with Venezuela. Are these sanctions on these nations a micro model of a future macro project that will eventually be imposed on the entire world? And why has American businessman and former Navy SEAL Eric Prince, who created the most controversial modern mercenary army, Blackwater, whose sister Betty DeVos is in the Trump administration and who himself also works with the administration, is winning contracts to send security and mercenary soldiers to both Mozambique in southern Africa and to Venezuela in South America? And have men stepped outside of their ethical boundaries, broken international law, and frighteningly mastered the technology to control and to manipulate the weather to destabilize nations? Let us take a look at a not much talked about but a highly sensitive subject in the field of climate alteration: geoengineering.
We are living in a climate where many people are claiming that they are woke. They don't actually tell you what they've woken from to what they've woken to, but they claim to be awakened. In this study, I really want to wake you up to an area called geoengineering that is manipulating the environment through weather control. And as I always encourage you at all times, as you go through this study, scrutinize, analyze, and look through everything, please research everything you see in this study.
Nature. It is one of the best places to escape to for peace of mind and to de-stress. If you have the economic means and you can find transport, you should always take every opportunity to escape the fast-paced life of the city. We can spend time outside of a man-made environment in natural surroundings, inhale the pure air, detach from negativity, filter out all the distractions and the noises that usually surround you. We can just stop and hear your own thoughts. Man has been given a divine mandate that in order to learn the most potent object lessons in life, you need to study and learn from nature. But ask now the beasts, and they shall teach thee, and the fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee, or speak to the earth, and it shall teach thee, and the fish of the sea shall declare unto thee, who knoweth not in all these that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this? Man has unconsciously taken heed to that counsel, and today it has been titled biomimicry, from the Greek words bio, life, and mimic, to imitate. London's Financial Times, that specializes in economics, published an article on how modern man has learnt from nature to build up and enhance the modern world. The dome of the Florentine Cathedral in Italy is made up of 4 million bricks, has 8 sides, and is the largest known groin vault ever built. Modern engineers are deeply puzzled on how this level of mathematical genius that defies gravity was built 6 centuries ago by a trained goldsmith, the Italian architect and inventor Filippo Brunelleschi. He learned to keep it stable after studying, guess what? Eggshells. Another Italian inventor, Leonardo da Vinci, was learning about flight by observing both the flight patterns of birds and bats. The pigeon was carefully observed by 2 American aviation pioneers, the brothers Orville and Wilbur Wright. Their studies led to the development of modern airplanes that we now use to travel around the world, but they weren't the first. On the front building of the University of Westminster's Regent Street campus is a plaque of an unknown science and naval architect, Sir George Cayley. This British inventor studied the fins of dolphins and their swimming technique to make ships more streamlined, and like Leonardo da Vinci, he studied the flight of birds, where he is recognized as the originator of the modern aeroplane. Cat's eyes were closely studied for their unique feline look and how they work in the dark, and the late British inventor Percy Shaw patented the cat's eyes in 1934 so we can see at night while driving where there are no street or road lights. How was modern paper developed for printing and for writing? It was by studying the wasp's use of wood pulp in nest building that French entomologist René Runner suggested a shift from using cotton and turn to fibers. So man is constantly learning from nature to improve their everyday conditions. And one scientist and inventor advised that this is the best method to follow. And George Washington Carver said that the study of nature is not only entertaining but instructive, and the only true method that leads up to the development of a creative mind and a clear understanding of the great principles which surround every branch of business in which we may engage. The singing birds, the buzzing bee, the opening flower, and the budding trees, along with other forms of animate and inanimate matter, all have their marvelous creation story to tell each searcher for truth. Aside from this, it encourages investigation, stimulates and develops originality in a way that helps the student to find himself more quickly and accurately than any plan yet worked out. Today, in the tech scientific business world, they are incorporating biomimicry as a template to govern almost every field of study. And as Carver advised, they are seeing how nature can indeed streamline your business for innovation. And as people are carefully observing that mankind is heading towards a destructive path, he is following that divine mandate: speak to the earth, and it shall teach thee. But what happens when you think that you can control nature, especially the weather? There has been a dramatic rise in global environmental disasters in recent years, and they are increasing ever so frequently, one after the other. But there are many who are speculating that they are not all natural. Is man tampering with nature? If you ever want to see what governments are doing or what they plan to do, Hollywood always gives a heads up so that you're not totally ignorant of what is going on.
Thanks to a system of satellites, natural disasters have become a thing of the past. We can control our weather.
And now we're learning that scientists and researchers are looking at how to change the weather on purpose. That's right. Lasers now could one day manipulate rain and lightning.
This is an image of cloud seeding that China conducted last year. Its purpose was to create cloud condensation to increase the amount of precipitation as a way to fight air pollution.
To ensure stability in its agriculture sector, China is not leaving things to Mother Nature. The Chinese government is planning to employ upgraded weather control systems in Heilongjiang, Jilin, and Liaoning. The project, which will continue until June, involves creating artificial rain using cloud seeding, special aircraft, rockets, and much more.
It is very difficult for people to comprehend and face the reality that there are men who are dangerously messing around with the weather and altering the climate by experimenting with invisible particles in the air. It is not about making money. It is way beyond that. It is all about control. There are a few news reports that mentions weather control, but it is still a subject that very few dare to touch for fear of being labeled as crazy. But the reality is, men are injecting things into the air, and their justification is they are protecting the planet from global warming. But they are messing around with something that is absolutely vital to life on this planet: the atmosphere. When astronauts launch their shuttle into space, they see a view of the world your average person can only dream of. When they look outside of their window, they see a light blue gaseous envelope that surrounds the Earth. That's the atmosphere. It is the atmosphere that produces the blue color of the sky, and its properties of bending the rays of light and reflecting them in all directions gives us the northern lights and the morning and evening twilight. The humidity-sensitive wood tissue in pine cones responds to changes in moisture levels in the atmosphere. Its connection to the weather helps flowers to bloom in the morning, helps the seeds of dandelions to blow in the wind. It helps birds to test the air currents to help them to lift off at the right time in flight. The atmospheric pressure guides insects to know when is the right time to mate. The air is considered as a conveyor of the different thoughts of mankind. The atmosphere is the vehicle that helps us to detect all different types of smells. We respond to different types of sounds through the ministration of the air, whether it is a musical of an orchestra or people talking to each other either on the phone or face to face. The weather affects our moods. The sunshine can wake us up with a beaming smile on our face, but dull weather can lead to seasonal affective disorder that can lead to very low mood swings, states of depression, and sometimes suicide. As men are getting a much more clearer understanding of the weather, they are seeing that it can affect the mood in society, and if it can be controlled, it is possible to cleverly influence human behavior. It was on day 2 of creation that the atmosphere was formed from the different materials of day 1, when air was separated from water, and the water was divided into 2 portions, atmospheric and oceanic. A British science teacher from Scotland and church minister, Thomas Dick, documented how central this gaseous envelope is to the entire safety of this planet. The atmosphere is now ascertained to be a compound substance formed of 2 very different ingredients termed oxygen gas and nitrogen gas. The atmosphere is one of the most essential appendages to the globe we inhabit and exhibits a most striking scene of divine skill and omnipotence. The term atmosphere is applied to the whole mass of fluids consisting of air vapors, electric fluid, and other matters which surround the Earth to a certain height. Were the Earth divested of its atmosphere, or only 2 or 3 of its properties changed or destroyed, it would be altogether unfit for the habitation of sentient beings. Were it divested of its undulating quality, we should be deprived of all the advantages of speech and conversation, of all the melody of the feathered songsters, and of all the pleasures of music. And, like the deaf and dumb, we could have no power of communicating our thoughts but visible signs. It forms an essential requisite for carrying on all the processes of the vegetable kingdom and serves for the production of clouds, rain, and dew, which nourish and fertilize the earth. So the atmosphere affects the whole planet, especially with the weather, and without it life wouldn't exist. But what happens when you don't believe that God is the creator of this earth, and you put your complete trust in mortal men in white coats, who believe that they do not have to give an account for any of their actions, and think that only their brand of unquestionable science can answer and solve all of life's mysteries and problems? During the term of the 36th US President Lyndon B. Johnson, he said in a lecture,
"And he who controls the weather will control the world."
He who controls the weather will control the world. One of his scientific advisors, the late Gordon James Fraser MacDonald, was a highly respected geophysicist and environmental scientist. He wrote a chapter in a book titled Unless Peace Comes that was published in 1968, where he foretold of climate alteration. The chapter he wrote was titled How to Wreck the Environment, that shows his credentials of working for the University of California and as being an advisor to President Lyndon B. Johnson. And this accredited scientist said, among future means of obtaining national objectives of force, one possibility hinges on man's ability to control and manipulate the environment. Weapon systems that could use nature in new and unexpected ways could be worldwide, as in the case of altering climate, or regional, as in the case of locally excited earthquakes or enhanced precipitation. A controlled hurricane could be used as a weapon to terrorize opponents over substantial parts of the populated world. Modification of storms could have major strategic implications. The environment knows no political boundaries. It is independent of the institutions based on geography, and the effects of modification can be projected from any one point to any other on Earth. We are beginning to understand several kinds of instabilities in the atmosphere. At heights of 40 to 50 kilometers above the Earth's surface, substantial numbers of charged particles are found which make this part of the atmosphere, which is the ionosphere, a good conductor of electricity. One can imagine several ways in which to increase the intensity of such electrical oscillations. The Brain Research Institute at the University of California is investigating the effect of weak oscillating fields on human behavior. The proper geographical of the source of lightning, coupled with accurately timed, artificially excited strokes, could lead to a pattern of oscillations that produce relatively high power levels over certain regions of the Earth and substantially lower levels over other regions. In this way, one could develop a system that could seriously impair brain performance in very large populations in selected regions over an extended period. No matter how deeply disturbing the thought of using the environment to manipulate behavior for national advantage is to some, the technology permitting such use will very probably develop within the next few decades. This was written just over 50 years ago, and to paraphrase what he said, they are tampering with the atmosphere that is altering the environment, and now they are not even hiding what they are doing.
Well, instead of doing a rain dance, we physicists are firing trillion-watt lasers into the sky to actually precipitate rain clouds and actually bring down lightning bolts. This is potentially a game changer.
But this is experimental.
It's experimental. However, in the laboratory so far it works. When you have water vapor and you have dust particles or ice crystals, you can precipitate rain. It condenses around the seeds. These seeds can also be created by laser beams. By firing trillion-watt lasers, you rip apart the electrons, creating what are called ions, and these ions act like seeds, like dust particles, bringing down rain and even lightning. However, for floods, for agriculture, farmers, for people planning wedding parties, football games, you name it, outdoor events and agriculture and flooding and even hurricanes, all of them could be subject to weather modification.
The narrator took his camera and filmed a number of environmentalists who had parts of central London on lockdown. A number of bridges and roads were not accessible for vehicles, where many were campaigning outside of the Houses of Parliament, in Marble Arch and on Waterloo Bridge against climate alteration and its connection to geoengineering. The movement is called Extinction Rebellion, and when observing, passers-by commented that it looked more like a New Age 1960s hippie flower power Woodstock Glastonbury festival than a sit-in demonstration against environmental destruction. Some were singing songs about worshipping the earth. Others were meditating in an open tent. Others protested by climbing up into trees and camping there. Whether they were successful in their campaign or not, the narrator cannot say. One man challenged them and said that the government wouldn't listen to them and take them seriously. They were offended. To the narrator, it was very interesting to observe and capture the moment. Though it may not be a common household discussion, geoengineering is a concern in political circles, where the British Parliament has published a 2009-2010 report explaining what geoengineering is and warning of its dangers. In the US state of Rhode Island, they have pushed for a bill, the Geoengineering Act of 2017, in order to counter the influence of geoengineering. The US government, on the other hand, is in full support of geoengineering. And as you look through the many different peer reviews, periodicals, PDFs, scientific journals, and mainstream media newspaper articles, though your average person around the world is oblivious to it, geoengineering is a very hotly debated topic, where one side of the debate thinks that it is totally justifiable and believes that it will protect the planet against global warming, and the other side believes that it is unethical and very dangerous when you believe that you can alter the atmosphere and play the role of God. Though it may be a relatively new discussion, men have been experimenting with the weather before most of us were even born. General Electric were already trying to make rain since 1946, and what is termed cloud seeding has been around for years.
Using a home freezing unit such as this, which has a temperature of around 0 Fahrenheit, we can form supercool clouds just like those in the natural atmosphere by breathing into the box. The moist air from the breath condenses and forms a cloud, and this cloud cools to a temperature of about 0 degrees Fahrenheit in a few seconds. Any moist thing placed in this box will produce such a cloud.
That was Vincent Schaffler, who was an American chemist and meteorologist, and in his eulogy in the New York Times, it documented that he was the first to conduct cloud seeding that started, according to National Geographic, in 1946. But some of the most influential millionaires and billionaires are pumping gazillions into the funding of geoengineering, Bill Gates being the most famous, where he wants to control the weather. That includes hurricanes, and he has also taken out a patent to go forward with this. The London Guardian documents others who also want to finance geoengineering and control the weather. Bill Gates is using his money to fund men like Ken Caldeira of the Carnegie Institution of Science and David Keith from Harvard University, and Canadian oil tycoon Murray Edwards and English businessman Richard Branson are both financing geoengineering. And when you have money, you can accumulate a percentage of power. While this may or may not shock people, you will be surprised at how many countries around the world are using cloud seeding. According to the Financial Times in 2012, there are currently more than 150 legitimate weather modification programs taking place in 37 countries. According to the National Center for Atmospheric Research in Colorado. Bloomberg in 2015 said, according to the World Meteorological Organization, more than 52 countries have cloud seeding operations, up from 42 years ago. There are 34 private companies that do weather modification. Besides China that has already been covered, Dubai is one of those countries that use cloud seeding by creating fake rainstorms in an $11 million project. 10 to 15% of the United Arab Emirates rain in 2018 was caused by cloud seeding in the desert, where the salt rockets are released from a plane that seeds the clouds that triggers downpours. And this has been ongoing for a number of years by many of the big corporations, starting with General Electric, but other companies have continued with weather modification. According to Bloomberg, for decades, Pacific Gas and Electric has spent millions annually on cloud seeding in the cold mountain range of the Sierra Nevada. But as American geophysicist Gordon MacDonald said, it can also be used in warfare. During the Cold War, the United States invaded Vietnam, a country in Indochina in Southeast Asia. The largest military in the world was defeated by a predominantly Buddhist peasant community. When America realized she had lost, Monsanto's Agent Orange was sprayed all over Vietnam's vegetation that has left many Vietnamese born with deformities. Some of them are even born without eyes. It's very sad and uncomfortable to look at, and to know that children are robbed of a normal life for a nation's national interest. One man described the effects of Agent Orange.
For America, the war ended in 1975. For the Vietnamese, the war has still not ended.
Under Henry Kissinger, the then United States Secretary of State, some very dark chess moves were set in order that most in Congress were very uncomfortable in supporting, manipulating the environment via weather modification to defeat the Viet Cong. The CIA and the US Air Force were the two forces to act out this unethical task. The Central Intelligence Agency initiated the use of cloud seeding, were key to the two main monsoon seasons that affected both Laos and Vietnam from years of experimenting with rainmaking in the United States and elsewhere. This is documented in a July 1972 edition of the New York Times, and there are a number of other US declassified documents to confirm that the USA was using cloud seeding during the Vietnam War. They are also openly admitting this, but others are trying to downplay these obvious truths.
Well, this fascinates me in part because, too, I remember reading the stories that China had used this during the Olympics, that the USSR had used this after Chernobyl to create rain clouds. I mean, did those really work then? We have some of these capabilities now?
Inconclusive. Even in the 60s, the CIA used this to bring down monsoons during the Vietnam War, to wash out the Viet Cong. Governments have been playing with this thing.
Alleged to.
Alleged to, right.
Yeah.
Now, realize that for decades now, these governments have been alleged to have experimented with weather control, but nothing conclusive.
Hollywood released a number of films as a sort of coping method to ease their conscience so that they could come to terms with that embarrassing defeat. But not everybody was happy with the use of weather modification in war. The different countries that make up the United Nations signed a multilateral agreement adopted by the General Assembly on December 1976, where it is prohibited to use environmental modification techniques in any type of warfare. But if anybody knows anything about the United States, she is above international law and plays by her own rulebook and does how she pleases and very rarely is held accountable to nobody. In 1996, the US military published a document titled Weather as a Force Multiplier, owning the weather in 2025. They tried to disassociate it from the US Air Force. When you read the names, the military-industrial complex is all over it. It documents how it wants to use weather mapping, a method first introduced by Sir Francis Galton, the father of eugenics and the cousin of Charles Darwin. That is a method that most news channels use today to tell about weather forecasts. It also wants to use the 21st century's most effective spying cameras, known today as drones, an effective tool that can be both used for good, where it can deliver medicines to people in Rwanda, and it is also available to the average citizen, or it can be used for evil, where they vary in size from a small copter that can fit in your hands to the size of a small insect, or to the much larger size of a huge airplane that flies with no pilot, called a UAV, unmanned aerial vehicle. And this document says it wants to use them in future warfare to manipulate the weather. A portion of it says, weather affects everything we do. Weather modification is the alteration of weather phenomena over a limited area for a limited period of time. In 2025, uninhabited aerospace vehicles, UAV, are routinely used for weather modification operations. From enhancing friendly operations or disrupting those of the enemy via small-scale tailoring of natural weather patterns to complete dominance of global communications and counter-space control, weather modification offers the war fighter a wide range of possible options to defeat or coerce an adversary. By 2025, the world, or parts of it, are able to shape local weather patterns by influencing the factors that affect climate, precipitation, storms and their effects, fog, and the use of the ionosphere and near space control and communications dominance, with political, environmental, economic, legal, and moral considerations. General Gordon Russell Sullivan, the 32nd US Chief of Staff and also the Secretary of the Army, said that the technology is there, waiting for us to pull it together. In 2025, we can own the weather. There are other portions of the US government who are also verifying this.
Most especially, I want to thank you, the dedicated men and women of the Central Intelligence Agency. It is a true honor to stand here today before the most elite intelligence professionals on the planet Earth. Nobody even close.
In one breath, the CIA is cleverly warning that nations are using weather modification that's triggering droughts and floods. But then they also, continuing from Vietnam, want to control the weather for her own self-interest. And for those who think that it is not a part of her future plans, if we are to be fair to the agency, the former head of the CIA, John Brennan, said that geoengineering will be used at a lecture at the Council on Foreign Relations.
Another example is the array of technologies, often referred to collectively as geoengineering, that potentially could help reverse the warming effects of global climate change. One that has gained my personal attention is stratospheric aerosol injection. or SAI, a method of seeding the stratosphere with particles that can help reflect the sun's heat in much the same way that volcanic eruptions do.
So do you have a clearer picture of what geoengineering is? It is manipulating whole populations by tampering with the atmosphere. But this is only one means of control. Almost 50 years ago, one man documented that weather control is only one part of the package, and it goes into the details of the different things they will use to manipulate populations.
Zbigniew Brzezinski, Columbia University foreign policy expert, Carter's Kissinger during the campaign, the new White House advisor for national security affairs.
U.S. National Security Advisor Brzezinski flew to Pakistan to set about rallying resistance. He wanted to arm the Mujahideen without revealing America's role. On the Afghan border near the Khyber Pass, he urged the soldiers of God to redouble their efforts.
We know of their deep belief in God, and we are confident that their struggle will succeed. That land over there is yours. You'll go back to it one day because your fight will prevail and you'll have your homes and your mosques back again because your cause is right and God is on your side.
The British military historian Nigel West is known as the unofficial historian of the Secret Services. In his 2000 book, The Third Secret, he said it was Brzezinski that started the CIA's 1979 clandestine support for the Afghan Mujahideen. American investigative journalist Robert Dreyfuss published a book in 2005 titled The Devil's Game that also documented that Brzezinski created the Afghan Mujahideen jihadis to weaken the Soviet Union. In his eulogy in 2017, the Washington Post said that the late Zbigniew Brzezinski will be remembered for the way he shaped the American role in the Cold War. The classified documents show that he did work with the CIA, and he also worked with another geopolitician, his fellow Polish countryman, the late Pope John Paul II, to also weaken the Soviet Union during the Cold War. He was an advisor to the late David Rockefeller, who he co-founded the Trilateral Commission with in 1973. And while a professor at Columbia University, he wrote a book in the late 1960s that he published in 1970. It is titled Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era. And this book details half a century ago exactly what the world would be like today, and weather control was only one of the many things mentioned that would be used to control portions of the earth. Let us take a review of this insider's work. He documented that the majority of the world's population would be crammed into cities that would lead to social unrest, an increase in crime, which is the most effective way to control the civilian population, on pages 16 and 17. He said the United States of America is a sort of a laboratory that will set the leading trends for the rest of the world to follow, on pages 24 and 25. People will be able to talk to each other more intimately through a video link on their electronic devices on page 19. This was written 50 years ago. All of our personal information will be stored on a database where different bodies and agencies can have access to it. This is on page 32. Racial tensions will flare up in the United States when blacks feel that there is a grave injustice against them. This is on pages 212 and 252. Scientists will create biological weapons in the lab that would or could be used on innocent civilians to keep certain nations or populations in check. That is crazy. As hinted at in the film I, Robot, man-made jobs will be replaced by robots and machines that will reduce jobs all over the world. That is on page 11. The newspapers and the news channels that make up the mass media will work together to influence and shape how the global masses will think. For journalists are one of the most powerful people on this earth who, under the instructions of their corporate control bodies, can emotionally draw you into a narrative. We will embrace it hook, line, and sinker, even if it is a complete lie. Let us look at one example. 9/11 hit the world at the opening of the 21st century. Whether you believe it is an inside job or not, the narrator will let each individual come to their own conclusions. But 3 years prior, a film called The Siege came out in 1998. It showed New York being attacked by Islamic terrorists, the US government using torture, concentration camps and prisons being set up, a heavy military presence on the streets, and emergency terror laws were passed without the people's consent, which accurately happened in post 9/11. We were constantly bombarded with anti-Islamic messages throughout the whole of the Western media, especially to the news channels and films, to whip up our emotions into a climate of fear and paranoia, with this idea that Islam wants to take over the world. But it was all propaganda and lies to justify US-led wars in a geographical region that has around 65% of the world's natural oil and gas reserves. But what has been the effects of mass media manipulation? Pew Research said it has led to a mass increase on attacks on Muslims in the United States that has escalated under the US President Donald Trump, provoked by pro-Israeli right-wing evangelical preachers and left-wing liberal comedians like Bill Maher, and promoted in the educational system to children from a very early age. The very sad reality is that it is all disinformation. In the UK, people hugely overestimate the number of Muslims in the country, and the same attitude is throughout the rest of Europe. But in a study in 2016 titled Perils of Perception, when people were surveyed in over 40 countries around the world, you can clearly see how the media have shaped their worldview without them even knowing it, especially in the West. The British population think that 1 in 6 Britons are Muslim, when actually fewer than 1 in 20 are. The findings show we think 15% of the population are Muslim, when actually only 4.8% are, less than a third of our guess. In France, the average guess is that 31% of the population is Muslim, when it is actually 7.5%. Other Western European countries such as Germany, Italy and Belgium are also massively out. The US and Canada are similarly inaccurate, with both having average guesses of 17% against actual figures of 1% and 3.2%. This is the power of the media. It can shape your reality. Brzezinski also documents that the banks are going to play a central role in global affairs that will affect every one of us. One of the most famous of these banks is Goldman Sachs, that have plenty of its alumni in key positions. Skull and Bones Yale graduate and former Hollywood financier and film producer Stephen Mnuchin, who worked for Goldman Sachs for 17 years, is the 77th Secretary of the US Treasury, the Chief Economic Officer of the United States. How much power does this man have? American sanctions, according to the Financial Times, carry particular force because of the crucial role of the US dollar and American banks in the global financial system, which allows the US Treasury to effectively cut off a country from access to much of the international banking system. In the past, European banks have complained loudly about the ability of the US authorities to dictate who they can do business with. Canadian-born economist and central banker Mark Carney is the current governor of the London-based Bank of England, who worked for Goldman Sachs for 13 years. He is a member of the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements. But who are they? An advisor to the US Department of Defense and the US Army, and the former professor to Bill Clinton in Georgetown University, the late American historian and author Carol Quigley said that the Bank for International Settlements in Basel, Switzerland, is a private bank owned and controlled by the world's central banks, which were themselves private corporations, dominate the political system of each country and the economy of the world as a whole. It was these bankers in England and Germany who financed Adolf Hitler's Nazi war machine, according to London's Telegraph newspaper. And this elite private club of the world's central bankers, according to Bloomberg, still have immense power. When Nicolas Maduro, the president of Venezuela, wanted to boost his economy from the sanctions of the US Treasury, the Bank of England rejected him from having access to his $1.2 billion worth of Venezuelan gold in the vaults of the Bank of England. They can wield power that brings heads of states to their knees if they don't toe the line. Specially appointed revisionists are rewriting history so that we have a very skewed and distorted view of the past. And how you look at the past affects how you view the present and how you will prepare for the future. They're using two forms of education to accomplish this. The school system is where more and more children are being robbed of having a knowledge of very crucial historical events. For how you look at the past also affects how you look at yourself and how you view other people. And Hollywood is using the power of film to, as one journalist put it, implant fake memories in our collective consciousness, where it is also shaping people's worldview, where they will have a paganized secular approach to the past. This has become successful, for in 1998, the British newspaper The Daily Mail said that as a result of entertainment, more people believe in the paranormal than believe in God. And Brzezinski said that one of the objectives of those who want to control the future is to reject creation and the fall, de-Christianize the thinking of the current generation, where they will have a nihilistic approach to everyday problems. And once you can erase the memories of man's past experiences, where they will not be able to learn from the mistakes of their forefathers, the world will be ripe and their minds will be open to go back to the pagan ideas that once dominated every pre-Christian culture, and entertainment will continue to paganize their thinking so that the current generation will all think alike with one mind.
I'd rather rule in hell than serve in heaven.
13.8 billion years ago, the Big Bang created the stars, the planets, the galaxies.
If God intended us to be mortal, we would have less curious minds.
Always remember, the universe has a way of leading you to where you're supposed to be at the moment you're supposed to be there.
While people's realities are being shaped through edutainment, Hollywood always foretells the future, where the majority of the planet has turned into a global surveillance state. And as previously shown, what was once seen as being just a form of entertainment has now become an everyday reality. And it is becoming ever so clearer that men plan things years in advance. And in order to make the global surveillance state more effective, you have to skillfully incorporate the civilian population to be a part of the system by the use of their own electronic devices, by cleverly reintroducing the principles of the spying system of the Papal Inquisition, keeping an eye on your neighbors.
At Ring, we want to make neighborhoods safer by keeping you informed. The Ring Neighbors app is a new way for neighbors to connect and share events. Now, when something happens, you can be one of the first to know, helping you stay one step ahead of crime. Together, we can build a smarter, safer community. Welcome to the new Neighborhood Watch.
Zbigniew Brzezinski also documented that there will be a closer and tighter surveillance on civilians, and this will be as a result of the digital technology of the multinational corporations. Since launching its first satellite into space in 2001, Digital Globe, a US-based company, helps geospatial businesses and professionals, where it has collected more than 7 billion square kilometers of imagery. Its satellites are the most accurate imaging sensors in the world that produces high-resolution satellite images, where they have digitally mapped out every portion of the Earth, a digital inventory of the surface of the planet. Its top customers are NASA, the United States Department of Defense, and the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. Its most famous client that it provides imagery to is Google, the most used search engine on the World Wide Web across all platforms. Most of Google Earth and Google Maps high-resolution imagery is provided by Digital Globe, where Google has become the largest information data gathering organization on the Earth, where it spies for each of the states. And its CEO admits that it has surveillance over all of its users, and all the tech companies along with Google are a part of a global signals intelligence spy network, where there is technically no escape, as we are all a part of that digital world. Digital Globe migrated its entire 18-year archive of 100 petabytes of digital imagery into a digital cloud storage database whose services are provided for by the Amazon Web Service Snowmobile of Amazon.com Inc. Amazon's founder and CEO, the richest man in the world, billionaire Jeff Bezos, owns the newspaper The Washington Post and is a business partner of the CIA, has loudly complained about the National Enquirer tapping into his emails and exposing his private photos of his infidelity. But he has no problem with doing the exact same thing to innocent people by selling to many of the top intelligence agencies a spy cloud server where they can spy on civilians and preserve their private data and use it against them in the future as blackmail if they step out of line. Amazon is one of the most powerful organizations on this earth and is already laying the groundwork for a global surveillance state. It has its own airline, plans to do its own shipping, has its own mail service, has a $575 million deal with Deliveroo, and it provides facial recognition for many of the top agencies and police departments around the world, which civil liberty campaigners have loudly complained violates their privacy. Alongside Siri, Alexa is the most powerful voice recognition system in the world that stores the algorithm of your voice pattern in a database, and Amazon is also one of the leading advocates of a cashless society, where she has set up Amazon Go, a 24-hour walk-in food store where there are no tills or checkouts, where you pay digitally. This is a global trend among some of the leading corporations, and Visa, the global credit card company, is also another company that is also pushing for a cashless system to be set up. Visa sits at the center of a global network of more than 1,500 banks linked by 1.5 million miles of secure fiber optic lines. And it does seem more convenient when you can just click one button and make a transaction in just seconds without going into your wallet and taking out coins and paper. But cashless is going into a direction where there is no reversing the trends, and Visa is also working with another system to make all of this possible, Apple Inc. Apple has teamed up with most of the major banks across the world to also push for this cashless system to eventually be implemented all over the world. And when one of the big four American multinational technology companies pursues a business partnership with one of the largest investment banking enterprises in the world, the US-based Goldman Sachs, everything the geopolitician Zbigniew Brzezinski said half a century ago is now coming to pass before our eyes. That also includes weather modification. We shall look at some excerpts from this 334-page book. Zbigniew Brzezinski said that the nation state as a fundamental unit of man's organized life has ceased to be the principal creative force. International banks and multinational corporations are acting and planning in terms that are far in advance of the political concepts of the nation state. He knew. Another threat, less overt but no less basic, confronts liberal democracy, more directly linked to the impact of technology. It involves the gradual appearance of a more controlled and directed society by using the latest modern techniques for influencing public behavior and keeping society under close surveillance and control. The courtship of the press and the mass media is a necessary concomitant of courting the masses, since the masses are influenced not only by direct appeal, but also through the intermediary of an image which is in part built up by the media themselves. The rejection of conscious history, thus striking the heart of the ideological religious approach that has dominated Western thinking, is itself a reflection of the contemporary crisis in values, assumptions, and beliefs, and of the collapse of all integrated and simultaneously purposive historical interpretations. Future developments may well include chemical and biological weapons, death rays, and still other forms of warfare. Even the weather may be tampered with. And to solidify that statement, he quotes from the geophysicist Gordon MacDonald, who writes a chapter in the 1968 book Toward the Year 2018. As one specialist noted, he said, by the year 2018, technology will make available to the leaders of the major nations a variety of techniques for conducting secret warfare of which only a bare minimum of the security forces need to be appraised. One nation may attack a competitor covertly by bacteriological means, thoroughly weakening the population, though with a minimum of fatalities, before taking over with its own overt armed forces. Alternatively, techniques of weather modification could be employed to produce prolonged periods of drought or storm, thereby weakening a nation's capacity and forcing it to accept the demands of the competitor.
So you see, it's not just weather control, it is the bankers, it is the media, it is manipulating history through the educational system in schools and through the educational system of Hollywood. And you can see when they want to target a people, they can use the media to manipulate your worldview. Let us look at one example how they can target one group of people and make the world believe that they are evil.
Stanford University in California holds many precious documents that are archived in the library of the Hoover Institution on War, and one of its former researchers took advantage of some of its unpublished material. The late Anthony Cyril Sutton was a British and American professor, economist, historian, and one of the best investigative writers of the 20th century. One of the many books he wrote was titled Energy, the Created Crisis, published in 1979. And if you want to have a clear understanding of modern conflicts, take note of these quotes. There is no absolute shortage of energy resources for our planet in the foreseeable future, Sutton says. We conclude that the proven reserves of these 5 major fossil fuels, oil, natural gas, coal, shale oil and tar sands alone could provide the world's total energy requirements for about 100 years. The theme of the energy debate simply has been who is to control the future use and mix of energy. It is a debate over future control, not future supply. The US Geological Survey that maps, understands and forecasts Earth's processes and changes has divided the world into 8 energy regions. The Caribbean and Central and South America is in Region 6, and underneath its soil, off the shores of its seabed, lies some treasures that the multinational corporations have already capitalized on. According to the Seattle Times in 2010, the Great Antilles, which includes Cuba and highlighted in red, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Puerto Rico, and the offshore waters, probably hold at least 142 million barrels of oil and 159 billion cubic feet of gas, according to a 2000 report by the US Geological Survey. Undiscovered amounts may be as high as 941 million barrels of oil and 1.2 trillion cubic feet of gas, according to the report. The multinational and transnational corporations have the latest high-tech drills that can penetrate deep into the earth. But it has created quite a bit of a problem. Modern drilling for oil and gas reserves have triggered many earthquakes in a number of states in North America and within countries in Europe that includes the Netherlands and in the UK. And if the drilling happens to hit a country that lies on fault lines, the results would be devastating. Is it possible that some of the earthquakes of recent times have been deliberately created as a result of geoengineering?
We did understand that water injection does cause earthquakes.
For the first time, state scientists in Ohio are making a direct link between fracking and earthquakes. The drilling process shoots a mix of water, sand, and other chemicals into rock more than a mile underground. That's where some say it can trigger activity along earthquake fault line.
A major earthquake shook the Caribbean nation of Haiti late today. It hit just 14 miles from the capital city, Port-au-Prince. The U.S. Geological Survey reported a magnitude of 7.0, the largest ever recorded in that region.
The 2010 earthquake in Haiti was devastating, with a huge loss of human life, a lot of damage to its infrastructure, and exploitation by NGOs. But was this a normal earthquake? Gordon MacDonald, the top US government geophysicist, said that man can create man-made earthquakes. The Serbian-American inventor Nikola Tesla created technology that could not only take out a number of planes out of the sky, as recorded in the New York Times, but technology that could also create earthquakes. The late Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, who supplied oil to Haiti under a scheme called PetroCaribe, accused the United States of deliberately causing the earthquake in Haiti in 2010 through pyrotechnic technology. But if this is true, why target Haiti? What impact has Haiti had on the modern world? Let us take a brief look at the history of Haiti. The Citadel Henry has been a UNESCO heritage site since 1982. It is situated in the mountains of northern Haiti and perched at 910 meters and covers an area of 108,000 square feet. It is the largest fortress in the Western Hemisphere, designed with impeccable engineering genius to house up to 5,000 people with food and water to last up to 1 year, with 365 cannons, as well as wells and dungeons, an enduring icon of Haitian independence. It was constructed with a labor of 20,000 workers between 1805 and 1820 to protect the former black African slaves in their new republic against the invasion of France. It was commissioned by General Henry Christophe, an ex-waiter, former soldier, an English Negro born in the Caribbean island of Grenada, who ended up in Haiti, where he quickly learnt French and spoke it fluently. He married and had children, and appointed himself the first king of Haiti, where he minted coins of his likeness. He appointed Prince Saunders, an African-American teacher, scholar, diplomat, and author, to govern the educational system in northern Haiti, where he became Christophe's advisor. He created a printing press, a newspaper, and a code to govern the island called Henry's Code. He had regular correspondence with Thomas Clarkson, the British abolitionist, whose letters are in the British Museum, and he traded with Britain that kept the northern Haitian economy stable, and the British Royal Navy shared intel with his government about a French invasion as long as Haiti wouldn't threaten British Caribbean colonies, where to this day Britain has preserved Haitian history.
The next station is Kew Garden. Find the gap between the train and the platform.
The National Archives in Kew in southwest London, which the narrator has been a member of for years, is the only place in the world that has a preserved original copy of the Haitian independence of 1804. It is so valued that it is stored in a special room with other priceless documents, and after taking pictures of it, it cannot be left alone. You have to call a member of staff so that they can safely put it back in the drawer before you leave. Written in French, this constitution outlines in detail a free, liberated Haiti, where Haiti became the first place in the world to abolish slavery. At the end of the declaration is the name of the Governor General of Haiti, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, an individual who is still controversial to this very day.
The Haitian dictator Jean-Jacques Dessalines. In the early 1800s, Dessalines ordered the genocide of all white people on the island. That included men, women, and children. And he did it. It's what he is best known for.
Dessalines did order the massacre of men, women, and children, but those who were French, in response to the burying alive, drowning, murdering, and the hunting down of black Haitians by dogs by a French general. The British and Americans watched the French get massacred. They could have stopped it if they wanted to, but allowed it to take place so that France wouldn't become a threat to American and British economic interests. This is documented by the late Trinidadian intellectual C.L.R. James in his classic work The Black Jacobins, the most respected and the best literary work on the Haitian Revolution. Never forget that how you look at the past affects how you view the present and how you prepare for the future, and how you'll view yourself and view and treat others. When the Italian explorer Christopher Columbus arrived in the Caribbean, in honor to the Catholic monarchs of Spain, the first place he landed he named La Hispaniola, meaning Little Spain. But in 1804, when it was declared an independent nation, the Governor-General Dessalines wanted to honor the indigenous Taino people who were wiped out by the Spanish, and he renamed it Haiti or Haiti, its original name by the Taino people, which means the land of mountains. But the America's first black head of state abolished a system that his fellow black revolutionaries spent a 13-year intense civil war to eradicate: slavery. It is an episode of modern human history that many are still uncomfortable discussing. A Haitian American architect designed a monument that is on display at the United Nations headquarters in New York as a memorial to the slaves of the diaspora. The slave depicted was carved from Zimbabwean black granite. Though the UN has played a key role in Haitian exploitation, she still has to honor the Haitian Revolution as paving the way for the abolition of blacks throughout the Americas. What are the effects that slavery has left on our modern world? We are living in a climate where people are looking for racial identity, but they're going about it the wrong way. Since slavery, when individuals of black African or white European descent get married, they risk the rejection of both family and friends, and the fear of being labelled as a sellout, and many do feel the pressure and strain of that liaison. When children are born from that union, which is called genetic admixture, depending on where they live, they may face pressure of cultural identity, not knowing which ethnic group they should have stronger loyalties to, especially, which we hope will never happen, a race war was to kick off. If the child is light-skinned, they are guaranteed to have preferential treatment in the black community, and if a woman, she'll be resented by women of a darker complexion who have not dealt with their own post-slavery insecurities. Since slavery, blacks view whites as very cold, heartless, lacking empathy, very two-faced, setting the world standard of beauty, loving animals more than they do humans, lacking seasoning in their food, consistent bloodthirsty warmongers and colonialists, with a deeply ingrained superiority complex and having no culture and having no rhythm. Blacks are seen as people who always turn up late. The males are seen as violent thugs, comical and athletic, not businesslike at all or hardworking, and men who don't spend quality time with their children. Black women are viewed as hypersexual, entertaining, mystical and not attractive, having an attitude and wanting to dominate a workspace or to just give them a bit of power. The Asians are neutral, but if you spend enough time with them, their post-slavery prejudices will start to leak out, and you will get to see where they really stand, especially if you ask their parents that you want their daughter in marriage. While the corporate business world and secular society are making some efforts to heal these stupid man-made rifts, the church is still the most racially divided institution on the earth that still functions on the segregated plantation codes of slavery. Instead of being a model for the world to follow, that city that is set on a hill, she holds onto her prejudices with pride, where outsiders looking in, documented in their secular journals, are very, very disappointed. They even say that Christians have rebuilt the wall that Jesus tore down. Nobody comes to the churches when they want to resolve racial divisions in society, for they are the worst example, and if you address them, they will only get defensive.
This here does the talking for me.
I have a Bible.
Well, then you ought to know.
No, what?
Same God made you, made me.
This is the effects of the Atlantic slave trade. It has built up and shaped the structure of global economics. It has affected how different ethnicities view and relate to each other. And it even affects how people view religion and how they view God. It still lingers with us to this very day, but very few have the courage to admit it. But why exactly did they use blacks as slaves? When young students are being trained to pursue a career as a dentist, many of them are taught that the strongest teeth that they will ever drill are from people of black African descent, who seem to have a harder bone structure than other ethnic groups. Scientists in the UK were carefully studying the bone mass index of different ethnic groups in Britain, and they closely looked at men of South Asian descent, white European descent, and of black African descent. The study was titled Ethnic Differences in Bone Geometry Between White, Black, and South Asian Men in the UK, and a portion of this 6-page study concludes that black men had higher BMD, an acronym for bone mineral density, at the whole body, total hip and femoral neck compared to white and South Asian men, independent of body size adjustments, with no differences between the latter two groups. Black men have larger bones, thicker cortices, and greater CSMI, an acronym for cross-sectional moment of inertia, compared to white and South Asian men. When Europeans landed in the Americas, they brought with them smallpox, influenza, measles, typhus, cholera, diphtheria, chickenpox, parathyroid fever, scarlet fever, bubonic plague, and whooping cough, diseases that were alien to the indigenous population. Within 100 years, according to the most recent closely scrutinized scientific data, over 3/4 of the indigenous people in the Caribbean, Latin America, North America, and Canada had died out who interacted with Europeans through the diseases, and not by war. Some Europeans panicked and didn't want to be responsible for the culling and extermination of an entire ethnic group off the face of the earth, who were already being worked to death. So Bartholomew de las Casas, a 16th century Spanish colonist and Dominican friar, in order to protect the Taino people, suggested the idea to replace them with black African labor. But why blacks? The Oxford-educated Howard professor and the first Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Eric Eustace Williams, quoted from Antonio de Herrera, the Spanish chronicler, historian, and writer, who said, and highlighted in red, that the labor of one Negro was more valuable than that of 4 Indians. That is why they used black people. But the black Haitians who fought in the French army, who were military trained, and even if some were illiterate, highly educated, stood up against the French Empire so that they could gain their independence from slavery. They were inspired by the French Revolution, when the French people rose up against a religious, autocratic bureaucracy. In an age of revolutions that was to steer the course of modern history, France was to also inspire another one in the Americas that also wanted to separate from the monarchical rules of the old world, the British Crown. But North America's ideals of liberty was originally only catered for one ethnic group. The United States, Thomas Dix said in 1823, form of government is that of a republic, and in religion they have adopted a system of cutting off all connection between church and state. A beautiful structure for liberty, but it is much to be regretted that the system of slavery still prevails, a species of madness altogether inconsistent with the character of any nation that denominates itself civilized and Christian. When the founding fathers separated the original 13 colonies and the embryonic stages of the United States was being laid, these slaveholders did not see blacks nor Native Americans as neither their equals or citizens. For by the time the Declaration of Independence was signed in 1776, white people were simply referred to as the Americans. The man who was standing in the center with a red waistcoat, who was later to become the 3rd US President, Francophone Thomas Jefferson, is credited as authoring the US Constitution. He has monuments dedicated to him in the United States, for he is seen as the embodiment of US independence and liberty. But he hated and deeply feared the Haitian Revolution because he was one of the top southern slave owners in the United States, where he kept his property at the infamous Monticello, where he fathered children with one of his slaves, Sarah Sally Jennings, that his zealous followers have tried to deny and conceal. He did not want his slaves to hear about the Haitian Revolution for fear of an uprising, but he himself benefited from it, where America more than doubled inside under his presidency. When he wrote the Declaration of Independence announcing the self-evident truth that all men are created equal, he owned some 175 slaves, according to the New York Times. As president, he acquired the Louisiana Territory, that will be further explained in a bit, but did nothing to stop the spread of slavery into that vast empire of liberty. In the archives of the largest library in the world, the Library of Congress in Washington, D.C., the capital of the United States, is a letter addressed to Thomas Jefferson, dated to the 23rd of June, 1803. It was written by Jean-Jacques Dessalines to Jefferson to recognize Haiti and to do trade with the United States' 13 colonies. Thomas Jefferson never responded and created an embargo against Haiti that backfired on him, for it posed a threat to the business interests of the merchants who still conducted trade with Haiti. As US history is being doctored by revisionists, and a poll in 2016 shows that 70% of North Americans have no clue about their own past, they would not clearly understand the current political climate and hostility the US government's foreign policy is towards Haiti if they don't know the background to how Haiti greatly contributed to why North America is what it is today. One man knew the importance of Haiti. He was a Guyanese historian and political activist, the late assassinated British educated intellectual Walter Rodney. He published a book in 1972 titled How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, one of the most scholarly works ever written on colonial history, and he mentioned a military strategist who helped to shape modern history. The continents of both North and South America were to be influenced by a man by the name of Francois Dominique Toussaint Louverture. He is best known by the latter two names. He fought the Spanish, British and French armies and was victorious. His military genius was to be the thorn in the side of another military genius, a man who saw Toussaint as a threat to expanding his empire, the Corsican-born French military leader Napoleon Bonaparte. Like Jefferson, he despised blacks, and while Jefferson had slaves, Napoleon wanted to reintroduce slavery back into the French colonies, a grand scheme that was a part of his French world order, but something was blocking him. Today, many of the foods and drinks we put into our mouths have the ingredients of sugar. The sugar industry grew as a result of people's sweet tooth in Europe, and in the 1780s, Haiti exported 60% of all the coffee and 40% of all the sugar consumed in Europe, more than all of Britain's West Indian colonies combined. The slave insurrection of Saint-Domingue in Haiti sent the prices of sugar in the European markets spiraling, Dr. Eric Williams said. Prices rose by 50% between September 1788 and April 1793. This was the economic effects of the Haitian Revolution, for slavery was not based on racism but on economics. If you were to ever visit Britain and see Waterloo Station and other famous places and landmarks, you would see the monuments of the men who ended Napoleon's career of creating a world empire for France. Though it ended with Britain, it started with the blacks of Haiti, who said, you know what, enough is enough. And in one of the most downplayed periods of recorded modern human history, guerrilla warfare was first being waged in Haiti against the French. Their freedom depended on it, for they knew that if they lost that war, they'd be going right back into slavery under Napoleon, under even more brutal and harsher conditions. But they had something in their favor, something that was to totally alter New World geopolitics, that was to wipe out French soldiers in their thousands. Mosquitoes. The Aedes aegypti is a yellow fever mosquito that originated in Africa that arrived in the Caribbean in the 1640s. Unlike people of East Africa and South Africa who get malaria, people of Western and Central Africa have an immunity to it. The mosquito bite goes into the red blood cells and produces a parasite called Plasmodium vivax that is currently a global epidemic in warm regions that is causing malaria. People of West Africa have a 95% blood type called Duffy negative and this protected the black Haitian revolutionaries against the mosquitoes in Haiti. The first African American to get a doctorate from Harvard, W.E.B. Du Bois, said in 1915 that Napoleon Bonaparte, master of France, had at this time dreams of a great American empire, and replied to Toussaint's new government by sending 25,000 men under his brother-in-law to subdue the presumptuous Negroes as a preliminary step to occupation and the development of the Mississippi Valley. Fierce fighting and yellow fever decimated the French. Almost 100 years later, in 2011, Forbes magazine said the most well-known slave uprising, of course, was in Haiti during the 1790s. Toussaint Louverture used malaria and yellow fever against the French. Though it is not common discussion in history courses, current Western journals have to admit that yellow fever altered the course of modern history, and when Napoleon's dreams were dashed, he almost became bankrupt, for its cash cow was now lost, and Napoleon had to sell his French territory in the United States to Thomas Jefferson, known as the famous Louisiana Purchase. It was Haiti that changed the world. But what exactly does the Louisiana Purchase consist of? The US benefited from the colonial strife next door. Broke after its Haitian defeat, France sold a large region, 828,000 square miles, from the western banks of the Mississippi River to the Rocky Mountains, to the US for $15 million. The Louisiana Purchase would prove to be one of the most profitable real estate transactions ever made, nearly doubling the size of the US at a cost of about 4 cents an acre. The map of the United States was forever changed when Thomas Jefferson was able to acquire the Louisiana Territory from Napoleon because the French general was unable to subdue Haitian troops trained by Toussaint Louverture. Napoleon wanted an empire in the West, but first he had to suppress the slave revolt in Hispaniola, where Toussaint Louverture had led the Haitians to victory. The French lost thousands of soldiers in trying to do so and returned to France defeated. That prevented the French from going to Louisiana. Without Haiti, one of France's richest colonies, Napoleon gave up on his dreams of a Western empire and made the deal to sell Louisiana. This history is often overlooked. For those who want to make America great again, please try not to forget Haiti. If you do, that's fake news. North America was not the only region to benefit from Haiti. South America would also be liberated from Spain with Haiti's help. The 45th US President Donald Trump had a meeting with members of CARICOM, Caribbean heads of state, who were receiving oil from Venezuela through Petrocaribe. It was a political strategy from the United States to weaken Venezuelan influence in that region, for Haiti has had strong ties with Venezuela that go back 2 centuries ago. Behind the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro is a large painting of Simón Bolívar, a Latin American revolutionary who separated most of Ibero-America from Spanish rule. In central London, just around the corner from Oxford Street, is Duke Street. It was on that road where Simón Bolívar stayed, where he learned revolutionary ideas in London, England, before he returned and liberated Latin America. In London's Belgrave Square, that has a high number of foreign embassies, there is a statue of this little-known revolutionary from an aristocratic background. It has the names of the 6 countries that he liberated. One is even named after him. There is Venezuela, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Panama, and Bolivia. He even abolished slavery throughout most of Latin America, and today the Afro-Colombians, the Afro-Panamanians whose forefathers helped to build the famous canal, the Afro-Bolivians, the Afro-Venezuelans, the Afro-Ecuadorians, and the Afro-Peruvians who have only been recently recognized by their government. But who instructed Latin America's most famous military hero to liberate the slaves? A man told Simón Bolívar that he would supply him with arms only on the condition that he would abolish slavery throughout Latin America. It was the first president of Haiti, and the 1973 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica documents that since neither Great Britain nor the United States would promise aid, Bolivar turned to Haiti, a small republic that had freed itself from French rule. President Alexander Pétion, on the right, gave Bolivar a friendly reception and granted him both money and weapons. While some may say that greedy blacks assisted whites in the building up of the global economic Western-run capitalist system, it was their efforts that led to the abolition of slavery, the expansion of the United States, and a free and liberated Latin America. But when the earthquake struck in 2010, it came out that Haiti was one of the poorest countries in the world. Nobody was actually telling you why. People accused it of voodoo. But who did the Haitians cry out to when the earthquake hit?
Haiti play a role in the world, but you can't forget that. You cannot take that away from us. If it is that, because of that, you said we have a curse, we have a contract with the devil. No, my friend. We got the freedom from God because God created everybody equal.
Kounya mwen tande yon bay ki koup li pete. Lèl pete mte do bay kap tout ap kriye ma pa la mwen Jésus sauvem Jésus petit mode yo.
Why are so many corporations flooding into Haiti for its natural resources? Nobody tells you of the high number of farmers that are being kicked off their land for corporations to extract the minerals. What about NGOs? Nobody asks about the missing $500 million of aid money that was donated to the Red Cross. Nobody talks about the prostitution rings of Oxfam who are totally now banned from Haiti. The exploitation by Doctors Without Borders. The paedophile rings of the United Nations who also deliberately put cholera in Haiti. Why does Hillary Clinton's brother own the gold mines in Haiti? All of this in post-earthquake Haiti. But what did they discover just after the earthquake? The Seattle Times informs us that the earthquake revealed, guess what? Oil reserves and potential gas reserves. The oil reserves are worth $120 billion, and they are larger than the oil reserves in Venezuela, that has the current highest oil reserves on Earth. If this 2010 earthquake in Haiti was orchestrated through geoengineering that disrupted a whole nation, we can only imagine what they have planned for the not too distant future.
So with Haiti, you can see a people who can be eradicated out of modern human history, demonize them, exploit their natural resources, and wipe out thousands of them through cholera, which is population control. In this last section of the study, we're going to see what the overall agenda of geoengineering is.
When protesters had parts of central London on lockdown, they sprayed graffiti in protest to a corporation that has played a role in damaging the environment, Shell, one of the big oil supermajors. Shell and other oil companies have always known what would be the future environmental damage of their drilling for the Earth's natural resources. But whether you like them or not, energy companies play a key role in our everyday lives, which makes them almost untouchable. In the English-speaking world in the 1980s, the public was raised on the wealth of oil dynasties and the filthy rich lifestyles of those who profit from it. And even when they occupy indigenous sacred lands without the people's consent, which they are known for doing, ruining whole communities and ecosystems to expand their already profit-rich multi-gazillion monopolies. When you want to keep warm in your houses in the winter, or you want to cook your food, unless you live completely off the grid, we are totally dependent on the energy companies that daily supplies us with the Earth's natural resources. Why is oil so resilient? Forbes magazine asks. Because demand growth for oil in sectors like petrochemicals, heavy industry, aviation, and other heavy transport keeps expanding significantly, with increased demand from petrochemicals, trucks, shipping, and aviation. Remember what the late economist Anthony C. Sutton said: it is not about the future supply of energy, but future control. When the largest marine oil spill in the history of the petroleum industry hit the Gulf of Mexico in April 2010, ruining the environment, though the Anglo-American oil company BP settled a number of federal criminal damages, her largest customer, the US Department of Defense, the Pentagon, continued doing business with her, supplying BP with $1 million contracts so that BP will continue supplying her with oil that fuels the US military-industrial complex's tanks, trucks, aviation industry, and our huge warships heading for Iran. The American-British businessman Bob Dudley is the current chief executive of BP, but is also a member of the board of directors since 2013 of Russia's leading oil company, Rosneft. When it comes to making profit, Cold War beefs die. But there is a global player that is overlooked that also conducts business with these major oil giants. We are all pawns on a global chessboard, innocently naive to what takes place behind closed doors. But in the game of chess, there are some key pieces: the king, the queen, the rooks, the knights, and the bishops. The Bishop of Rome, Pope Francis I, is the most powerful geopolitician on this earth. He sits on a throne between two angels, a model of God's throne, clearly showing whose place he wants to take on this earth. He meets with the founders and current heads of the technotronic digital age, whose companies collect all of our data and is preparing for a global cashless society. The top players in the most popular sport on earth, football, show their honor to the Bishop of Rome. And it's not just in the entertainment of sport. The chairman and CEO of the largest multinational mass media and entertainment conglomerate, Disney's Bob Iger, also visits the Vatican to get a photo op with the Pope. Mr. Alfred Francis Kelly Jr., chairman of the board at Visa Inc., who is also pushing for a cashless society, organized the visit of his fellow Catholic Pope Francis I and his entourage in New York, and others all over the business world flood to the Vatican, taking economic advice from the Bishop of Rome, which also includes the members of the top energy companies that includes men like Bob Dudley, the CEO of BP, where the Pope talks to them about protecting the environment. The Vatican has also attracted some of the most famous individuals on this earth to discuss climate change and the effects of geoengineering. But not everybody is sucked into the vortex of papal hype. There are still a few people with open minds who have not brought into the cunning strategy of this smiling Jesuit. Greenpeace, one of the most organized NGOs and probably the world's leading advocates on preserving the environment, did a little digging into the economic profits of the Institute of Religious Works, better known as the Vatican Bank, one of the leading money laundering institutions on this earth. Wall Street banker and French financier Jean-Baptiste Deauville of François is the current president of the Vatican Bank since July 2014. On the official website of the Vatican Bank, it says that he is the non-executive of Targes LLP. Targes have investments in a number of energy companies that includes, to name a few, Shell, Total, and Occident Petroleum. British-Australian billionaire, hedge funder, a papal knight, a Goldman Sachs alumni, and financial backer of Brexit, is also a member of the board of the Vatican Bank, who is the chief executive and senior investment officer of CQS, one of Europe's leading multi-strategy asset management firms that also has assets into these top energy companies that has a huge monopoly in the earth. This Jesuit Pope outwardly advises the energy companies on caring for the environment, but is covertly investing into these very same monopolies. Your average person would find it absurd if you were to tell them that this system wants to take over the world. She has openly declared it in her own words. It's not a secret. Only a few scattered people who still diligently study the prophetic charter are aware of this, but most overlook this. Why? Remember, how you look at the past affects how you look at the present, how you prepare for the future, and how you will see yourself and view others. So how will all roads lead to Rome? You carefully condition minds into the fantasy of the Middle Ages when papal Rome once ruled most of Europe, so you can familiarize the world's minds into the past by using the most popular shows. You then cleverly and carefully implant Roman Catholic imagery into the public. This will slowly break down people's resistance when they see heroes like Robin Hood, played by Russell Crowe, and John Wick, played by Keanu Reeves, and via musicians like Beyonce. This will put people's guards down to the papacy. Then you can create the atmosphere of the Inquisition of the Dark Ages by encouraging people to spy on their neighbors, and the whole world will be reliving once again the time period of the Dark Ages. While they become distracted, the Vatican, who has the most ancient and the most experienced State Department in existence, will continue what she has been doing for over 1.5 millennia, covering the width of 5 continents, dealing with the different nations and kingdoms and expanding her influence. but she knows that she can only accomplish her lifelong dream with the assistance of a much younger power, who she is only second to with the number of nations she has diplomacy with, the United States. How will the papacy influence the United States in fulfilling her will? Well, let's see. The United States is building a huge wall to separate it from Mexico's border. The Pope said that Donald Trump shouldn't build a wall. Remember, the Pope is a Latino from the US southern neighbor, and Latinos have turned into a powerful voting bloc that can influence who will become the next US president. When you see Catholic bishops rooting for the immigrants to illegally flood into the borders, it is not that they care for the families, but that it will increase the Roman Catholic population in the United States that has greatly dwindled in recent years. With the US senators coercing Latinos into politics, this will affect the papacy's influence in the world's #1 economy. And when you want to get into the White House, men and women are fully aware that we need the Catholic vote, for they dominate the swing votes in those key states and determine who will become the next Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America. Then all presidents dressed in Vatican Protocol black gives homage to the Godfather, who is dressed in white. But you will see that they will follow the same geopolitical destiny. President Donald Trump meets with Jens Stoltenberg, the Secretary General of NATO, to strengthen military ties. Pope Francis I also meets with the Secretary General of NATO, and not for world peace with NATO's horrific bloodthirsty track record. President Donald Trump from his office converses with astronauts from NASA on their space program. Pope Francis I from his office also converses with NASA on their space program. And NASA is also into geoengineering. We get a little heads up from Hollywood of what they are capable of doing.
Your father was experimenting with a highly classified material that could threaten our entire solar system. All life would be destroyed. We're counting on you to find out what's happening out there.
Though NASA says that geoengineering on Mars won't work, she plans to pursue it on Earth, where she will attempt to cool the Earth. Since 1984, the United States has continued diplomatic relations with Vatican City. The papacy needs to retain that political liaison to fulfill her overall and ultimate goal. And the Pope also has his official nuncio or ambassador in the United States to shape US-Vatican relations and influence in US foreign policy. And the Vatican will continue to strengthen geopolitical ties with the United States. While most of us will be distracted and the world is carrying down a road of no return, the papacy's true colors will start to come out when you start to see her supporting the US energy wars. This is a continuation of Cold War politics when these two kingdoms strengthen their unholy alliance. But what may shock people is that the United States has been fighting wars on behalf of the Vatican for years. What was the real overall objective of the Vietnam War, and why was the United States out there? Investigative journalist Diana Johnstone in her book Fool's Crusade said that in Vietnam, the United States failed in its most ambitious project to impose a Western-style, Catholic-led satellite regime on the territory of an Asian nation. Before 1990, Yugoslavia was a relatively peaceful region in the Balkans. But then something changed drastically, and one ethnic group was falsely accused of starting the conflict.
The Serbs started this war. The Serbs are the original cause of the war.
They are the complete aggressors and wrongdoers.
The Serbian people were unfairly targeted as the instigators of the Balkan Wars. Bosnian Serbs face trial at the International Criminal Court, but the Catholic Croats like Ante Gotovina get off scotch-free for war crimes. But the Pope apologized to the Serbs for the war crimes committed against him, for it was the Vatican, not the Serbs, that instigated the wars in Yugoslavia in the early 1990s, where they supplied arms to Catholic Croatia to build up her military arsenal. And the Catholic Croat Ante Gotovina received full support from the late Pope John Paul II, the true instigator of the Second Balkans War. The British-trained Tutsi Paul Kagame, the president of Rwanda, paid a visit to Pope Francis I in the Vatican, and he received a message from the Pope that was quite interesting. In the film Hotel Rwanda, it gives a fairly balanced account of the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. But it shows scenes of nuns and priests being victims of the genocide, a distorted portrayal of history, for the case of the perpetrators showed that it was the Catholic nuns and the Catholic priests who were leading out in the massacres. And they were the instigators of the genocide, and that is why the Pope apologized to the Tutsi Paul Kagame, for it was the Catholic Church-inspired Hutu militias, the Interahamwe, who led out in the genocide. When civil war was kicking off in Ireland from the 1960s to the early 1990s, though the British government was not innocent, the IRA had assistance from an unseen force, and recent evidence has shown that it was the Catholic priests who were at many times responsible for the IRA bombings that blew up and killed many innocent people. So why didn't they face trial? Because they were protected by the police, ministers, and the Catholic Church. She gets away with murder. And the Second World War was her greatest attempt ever to regain total global supremacy. It has already been shown that the international banking cartel financially propelled the Nazis into power. But who gave the fascist states the religio-political support? The late Walter Rodney said that the fascist colonial powers were retarded capitalist states where the government police machinery united with the Catholic Church and the capitalists. Most schools were controlled by the Catholic Church as a reflection of the unity of church and state. The British newspaper The Daily Mirror in 1944 said that the Vatican was in bed with fascism, and more articles are reluctantly coming to the light of the Vatican's greatest attempt of realigning herself with despotic regimes to take over this earth, whether it was Franco's Spain, Hitler's Germany, or Pavelich's Croatia, or other states. A former spying agent for Britain's intelligence agency MI5 during World War I, Benito Mussolini, was to give the Vatican the economic springboard she needed. The Vatican denies that she has any connection to Mussolini, but the articles of the day and the photographic evidence of the Lateran Treaty in 1929 prove otherwise. Italian dictator Benito Mussolini had one piece of an ego and forced conscription on Italian men who did not want to join the war effort. One man fled fascist Italy and came to London, England, and became a permanent resident. He worked for the British government during World War II, wrote political commentaries for the BBC, studied at the London School of Economics, became a member of the British Interplanetary Society, and as a prolific writer became a member of the Society of Authors. In 1954, in the London Gazette, he changed his name from Teofilo Gardini to Avro, Manhattan. When he wasn't hobnobbing with the elite, as one of the best writers of the 20th century, he sometimes put his life at risk for the truth, receiving many death threats. He published many books, but one of them was titled The Dollar and the Vatican, that gives us a picture of American foreign policy and how the Vatican will capitalize on America's global bloodbaths. Avro Manhattan said that it is big business that is the promoter of practically all subsequent North American aggressions, the most persistent destroyers of the civil liberties of the American masses, blatantly advocating economic expansionism by the use of violent economic and financial aggression supported by brute force. When people spend endless time blasting each US president who comes into office, they are wasting their time. They are all a part of a system, and they are nothing but figureheads. Let us look at some breaking news so we can clearly understand what is going on in geopolitics, especially its connection to geoengineering.
The scale of foreign interest is unprecedented. Between 2010 and 2016, 320 new embassies were opened in Africa, probably the largest embassy building boom anywhere ever.
You now have a fund, a mining fund, that you're setting up.
Yes.
What is that about?
Well, like your previous segment was talking about, huge growth in electrification or hybridization of vehicles.
Right.
And to do that, For all that technology and all that development, it actually takes minerals coming from generally rugged places. You know, cobalt is what you need to concentrate all those electrons to make a battery more efficient. 2/3 of the world's cobalt supply comes from the DRC.
Because, of course, the lifeblood of every economy is oil and gas.
The continent of Africa is bigger than China, India, Argentina, the United States, and most of Europe combined. But it seems to be attracting opportunists from all over the world. A video called Coney 2012 was aired online that attracted millions of viewers on YouTube. Its role was to coerce the public into tracking down Ugandan warlord Joseph Kony. But what was its real objective? Ugandans clicked that it wasn't about Joseph Kony at all, but the Western corporations needed an excuse to monopolize on Ugandans' newly discovered oil reserves. The US military bombed a number of Al-Shabaab Islamic Jihadi militants in Somalia and East Africa. Was it because they wanted to cleanse Islamic extremists from Africa? No, not really. It's because Somalia, like Uganda, has oil and gas reserves, where the Somali government welcomed the drone strikes to protect them, where they would supply the West with oil. Somalia's next door neighbor, Djibouti, is flooded with 3 different militaries that is creating a bit of a problem. Camp Lemonia is the headquarters of US African Command, better known as AFRICOM, the only permanent US military base in Africa. But Djibouti is in debt to China, who also has a military base in that African country that is creating a geopolitical tension. But why are all these countries flooding into the African continent? What does this continent have that is shaping the technotronic digital age? Almost 100 years ago in 1923, Jamaican-born Pan-Africanist Marcus Garvey said, "Most of us know or ought to know the value of minerals. Oil, coal, iron, copper, and all other minerals are to be found in Africa in abundance. We can readily realize the vast amount of wealth lying buried in Mother Africa, awaiting development. Europe today are trying to interest American capitalists in the exploitation of the wealth of the great continent." In 2007, the London Guardian published an article titled "Scramble for Africa," verifying what Garvey said. With oil, gas, timber, gold, coltan, and bauxite, Africa is home to some of the largest deposits of natural resources in the world. The US is interested in the region as a cheap and reliable alternative to the increasingly volatile Persian Gulf. We live in an era called the technotronic digital age. But all these things we use in our everyday lives, whether it be cars, phones, laptops, and even space satellites, cannot function without the highly rich, heat-resistant minerals of the African continent. And while we are benefiting from these minerals, others are working on the continent, being exploited by militias and corporations. One man said that if the corporations were to leave the Congo's $24 trillion worth of mineral alone, the earth would not be able to function. It was the African slave trade that built up the modern world and the wealth of the West and to modern capitalism. And Africa's natural resources and exploitative labor is still the main drive that steers our modern world in the digital age, whether it be for electronic cars or the 4 different metals that help our mobile cell phones to function. Informal Trump advisor Eric Prince, former Navy SEAL and US businessman, made it very clear that the technotronic digital electronic age is dependent on the minerals of the Democratic Republic of Congo. His sister Betty DeVos, the current United States Secretary of Education, is in the Trump administration, and he is also still working with the administration where, as Arrow Manhattan said, it is business as usual. And one of the major drives of the US government is, guess what? Geoengineering, manipulation of the weather. Eric Prince runs a security firm called Frontiers Services Group that provides security to big corporations. He has financial investments in Mozambique, and not just in the Democratic Republic of Congo. But what is in Mozambique? It has been recently titled the next oil and gas hub. But as these citizens are not benefiting from their own land, it has created a backlash of frustrated Islamic insurgents. And as the Trump administration is pursuing the path of weather modification, is it possible that this can be used on a battlefield to crush insurgents who are in the way of the West drilling for natural resources? Well, let's see.
Eye of the storm edges closer and closer to the Mozambican coastline as the day continues. In fact, we're expecting it to make landfall between about 10 and 11 this evening. Here it is on our satellite. This is current imagery at the moment. You'll see it's a very wide eye of the storm, and it's heading almost towards Beira.
Have you ever had a storm like this in this area? I've never heard or seen anything like it, she said.
Relief agencies say there may never have been a disaster like this anywhere in the entire southern hemisphere.
2 cyclones hit Mozambique in one season, something never seen before in its entire history. The first one being described as the worst disaster in the southern hemisphere, very similar to the earthquake in Haiti that was also described as the worst in that region. And just as a cholera outbreak hit Haiti, one was already in Mozambique but exploded when the cyclone hit. Interesting. Haiti is poor because France kept it in a permanent economic stranglehold since its independence in 1804. And reports from Friends of the Earth, Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International have documented that many people of Mozambique are being kicked off their own land by force, like the farmers in Haiti, by foreign multinational corporations to drill and extract its natural resources. And nobody tells you why they are poor. The legacy of hundreds of years of colonialism and a 15-year civil war has left Mozambique extremely poor, according to the London Guardian. But this is what you don't see. It has a lot of natural beauty, something that is usually deleted by Western corporate-controlled media channels who always portray Africa in a very negative way. There is a lot of construction, and though the Chinese are in Africa for its own natural resources purposes, with their own exploitations, it is at least building some solid infrastructure to Mozambique to boost its economy and to help its civilians. That also includes the longest suspension bridge in the whole of Africa, built by Chinese engineers, that wasn't hit by the cyclone in the north. But there is a reason this Southeast African country is being exploited. When people are getting bone implants, the strongest metal that doesn't rust or erode is tantalum. It is found in Mozambique and other parts of the world, but as these civilians are not reaping the benefits, rioters have attacked a tantalum mine in Mozambique. Tantalum is used in the production of electronic equipment, including medical implants, mobile phones and computers. The London-based natural resource company Gemfields has a complete monopoly of Mozambique's rubies. The American actress Mila Kunis is the ambassador for the company. But there's something unique about the rubies in Mozambique that sets it apart from the rest of the world. Situated in the north of Mozambique is Cabo Delgado. It has the world's biggest ruby and pink sapphire deposits, the location of 40% of the world's rubies, according to the Telegraph. Mozambique now accounts for as much as 80% of global ruby output, according to Bloomberg. Mozambique also has a lot of coal, and foreign companies are monopolizing it. But the people of Mozambique is not benefiting from their own land's resources. But Mozambique's Cabo Delgado in the north, where the ruby and sapphire deposits are, has one of the world's biggest untapped offshore gas fields. Mozambique has so much natural resources that it is attracting corporations to just flood into that country and just take it. For it has become a gas supplier to the world, and corporations like the US ExxonMobil, Japan's Tokyo Gas, the UK's British Gas, and Italy's ENI are looking to the banks to help finance them for their projects. But not everybody is happy that these Eurasian corporations are colonizing their lands, and it is breeding resentment. A number of African channels and one Chinese news channel were the only media outlets that were reporting the frequent attacks of Islamic jihadis in northern Mozambique. Except from a few online articles from Western newspapers, there was a complete media blockout by Western journalism concerning the jihadi attacks in the Anadarko gas field in Mozambique. Could the double cyclones in the northern Mozambique be a response to the jihadi attacks? According to the already quoted document Weather as a Force Multiplier, Owning the Weather in 2025, it reads that weather modification is a force multiplier with tremendous power that could be exploited across the full spectrum of war-fighting environments. Weather modification offers the war-fighter a wide range of possible options to defeat or coerce an adversary. The ability to modify the weather may be desirable both for economic and defense reasons. Attacks started to intensify against the Anadarko gas fields. Beheadings started to threaten the billion-dollar gas project in June 2018. In January 2019, there was an increase in insurgency attacks that took place in the gas-rich sector in the north. And in February 2019, Islamic insurgents intensified their attacks. Then something happened in March that was to displace and kill hundreds and thousands of people in the north.
1,000 people are feared dead after a cyclone smashed into Mozambique. Villages have disappeared, roads been destroyed, homes razed to the ground, communication and power lines cut. The southern African country's president said he saw bodies floating in the water when he visited the affected area on Monday.
Were these two storms in one season the worst in its history, the product of climate change? Or were they as a result of weather tampering, of geoengineering? That is something for you to think about. But Mozambique is not a unique case. Taking natural resources by force under the camouflage of a global war on terror is an ongoing colonial trend, and as this study draws nearer to completion, we shall see where this is leading to. The economist Anthony C. Sutton said that the Earth has enough gas, coal and oil that will last for about 100 years. But Zubin Brzezinski published a book in 1997 titled The Grand Chessboard that shows that America plans to control and monopolize all of these resources, and a key word comes up in his book: pipeline. Hollywood has flooded the box office with films about Afghanistan, not taking into consideration the civilian casualties, that's overlooked, but presenting US soldiers as heroic war veterans, where influential actors are brilliant marketing tools to promote the US military-industrial complex. But why is the United States in a country that borders China? The region named the Golden Crescent is where 90% of the world's opium poppy fields are grown, and since the 2001 US-led coalition invasion, the heroin narcotic trade has catapulted, lining the pockets of Turkish and Albanian drug cartels and members of the Western secret services. The Afghan civilians have their mouths swabbed to take their DNA, as well as being on a biometric database where they have their fingerprints taken and an eye scan. It looks like a kind of Mark of the Beast trial run, a laboratory test for a wider future program, so that each civilian's detail is on a digital file, so that no one is off the grid, just like we are tracked by our digital devices, where we have traveled, what we serve, how long we have served for, and the gazillion cameras in the airports and in the cities that also tracks our facial recognition. One of the main reasons for the US in Afghanistan is, guess what? A pipeline that feeds different countries with the energy of oil and gas. The conflict in Afghanistan is over a pipeline, and these pipelines in Eurasia are increasing the spread and number of internally displaced people. The narrator took his camera to central London to see what the conflict in Ukraine was all about a number of years ago. The best way to learn about a nation is to speak to different people of that nation, and you will realize how much the news is lying to you on a daily basis. The narrator watched RT to see from a Russian perspective, and the BBC, Fox and CNN from a Western perspective, but the most insightful approach was when listening to the Ukrainian civilians themselves. When you live in the UK, you are totally unaware how much the conflict affects you until you discover that a high volume of Europe and UK's gas supplies comes from Russia. And like Afghanistan, the conflict is over a pipeline. How many civilians are dying each day, and how many families are being destroyed and torn apart over a pipeline? This is where Syria comes in. Whole communities have been bombed and left desolate, and drone footage shows whole cities that were once flourishing now looking like a ghost town, where chemical weapons that burn through skin and bone are dropped on civilians, killing innocent women and children. That's disgusting. And the White Helmets, praised by the West as Syrian humanitarian aid rescuers, is a jihadi group funded by a British army officer, as documented in the London Guardian, to destabilize the Syrian army. And while thousands flee the conflict, neighboring countries in the Middle East and countries in the West are reluctant to take them in, not just because they are hostile to outsiders, but for fear that these refugees could be harboring some disgruntled jihadi sleeper cells. And what is the Syrian war over? You guessed it, oil and gas. Yep, a pipeline. Al Jazeera calls it Syria's Pipelinistan War, and everything the narrator is sharing with you is from mainstream media journals. It is open and available to the public to see. And the $10 billion gas pipeline deal signed between Iraq, Iran and Syria in 2011, where America did not get a bring-in, is what the conflict is over. And Syria's neighbor Iran has sanctions imposed on her energy industry, where President Donald Trump has pressured Iraq not to buy energy from Iran because Iran has the biggest gas field that she co-shares with Qatar, which is the key reason why Iran has become the US's #1 new foe, because the United States cannot control another nation's energy resources, and she will gamble the world's financial markets to make a point.
Trump gambles the world economy on shutting down Iran's ability to sell oil overseas.
We have the greatest military, thank God, on the face of this earth. We have the most advanced weapon systems, and a strong message needs to be sent that a huge price will be paid if you take on the United States of America. Simple peace through strength, and it works.
Today, the United States is alone in the world and cannot create a coalition. Countries that are its friends are too ashamed of being in a coalition with them.
Mike Pompeo, the incumbent 70th US Secretary of State, claimed that Iran poses a threat. In May 2019, he attended the infamous Bilderberg Conference, privy to the secretive dynamics of global geopolitics. In June 2019, a tanker was attacked. Many believe it was a false flag, but the US government blamed the Iranians. In that same month, the Iranians bombed a US drone out of the sky that Iranians said was in their airspace. It should be noted that Iran is no easy pushover. As powerful as Google is as the world's top information gathering system, it is not infallible, for the Iranians in 2018, working with the Chinese, hacked into a CIA system using Google, and killed dozens of US spies, which may be the reason Google deleted many Iranian accounts as a response. This tension has been building up for a while, for at the 2013 US Oscars, the First Lady Michelle Obama announced the award for Best Film to Ben Affleck, Argo. That's when you know how strongly tied the US government is with Hollywood. And when you see another actor, Gerard Butler, doing a lecture at the Department of Defense, better known as the Pentagon, whether he was conscious of it or not, he also helps the anti-Iranian war effort.
Threaten my people with slavery and death. This is madness! Madness. This is Sparta!
The film 300, though based on an actual war, unfairly depicted the Iranians as very ugly and deformed. It was blatant anti-Iranian propaganda, and the Iranians were not impressed, for they knew it was clever psyops programming, a build-up to war, and they picked up that Hollywood was shaping global public opinion about the Iranian people. But as a war is building up with Iran, which many are hoping and praying does not kick off, there is still another one being waged against Iran, and it is not military but economic, where US sanctions on Iran has affected its oil, banking and shipping industry that has halved the value of its currency, increased inflation, increased the cost of living, and the rise in food prices. But the United States has also afflicted her with sanctions that are greatly affecting people's health. With her global economic strength, the United States has influenced some of the biggest Western pharmaceutical companies who refuse to have anything to do with Iran. When you are sick and the best medical treatment can only be imported from abroad, and you are denied to have that human right, it would breed frustration. And as patriotic as Iranians are, these sanctions have made many riot and turn on their own government, which the US wants to happen. But many are still getting very sick and are suffering, like the Vietnamese, because of the US self-interest. And this includes the most vital body fluid for all humans: blood. There are over 8,000 haemophiliacs who are finding it harder to get blood clotting agents. Operations on haemophiliacs have been virtually suspended because of the risk created by the shortages. The society representing the 8,000 Iranians suffering from thalassemia, an inherited blood disorder, has said its members are beginning to die because of a lack of an essential drug, deferoxamine, as seen on the left, used to control the iron content in the blood, according to The Guardian. If the United States can pressure the entire corporate and business world to not buy or sell with Iran, you are seeing a foundation being laid for something a lot bigger, for another country is experiencing a similar economic abuse.
Yeah, look, we're in conversation with major American companies now that are either in Venezuela or, in the case of Citgo, here in the United States. I think we're trying to get to the same end result here. You know, Venezuela is one of the three countries I call the troika of tyranny. It'll make a big difference to the United States economically if we could have American oil companies really invest in and produce the oil capabilities in Venezuela.
Angel Falls in Venezuela is the highest uninterrupted waterfall in the world. But even amongst such a beauty, Venezuela's northern neighbor, the United States, made it openly clear that she is after her oil interests. These are her own words. It has already been shown that the Bank for International Settlements has chosen who has the right to Venezuela's wealth. And like Iran, Venezuela is being crippled by economic sanctions so that it will bend to outside pressure and cave in. This has also had a tremendous effect on the civilian population, where millions have fled to neighboring countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. And like Iran, civilians who are unable to either work or eat to provide for their families are demonstrating en masse. But who is covertly supporting these demonstrations? And who has given their support to the US-educated Venezuelan politician and opposition leader Juan Guaido? It is the United States and the papacy, the two kingdoms. When Pope Francis I addressed the energy companies, he taught them to incorporate the Catholic social teaching, the common good, that President Donald Trump incorporated into his State of the Union speech.
But we must reject the politics of revenge, resistance, and retribution, and embrace the boundless potential of cooperation, compromise, and the common good.
Though the Pope has given the world an impression that the papacy is neutral concerning Venezuela, they fully support regime change. For the London Economist documented that in an overwhelmingly Catholic country, Venezuela, the country's Catholic bishops expressed their backing for the protests sweeping the country. They described the National Assembly, whose leader Juan Guaido has declared himself interim president, as the only legitimate organ of popular sovereignty. Former Special Rapporteur Alfred de Zayas, who finished his term in the UN in March, has criticized the US for engaging, and highlighted in red, in economic warfare against Venezuela, which he said is hurting the economy and killing civilians. US sanctions also target individuals and stop US-based companies or people from, and highlighted in red again, buying and selling new debt issued by PDVSA, which is the Venezuelan state-owned oil and gas company, or the government, according to the London Independent. The United States and its sanctions, through its connections to the global banking system, is the only power on earth that could prevent individuals, companies, or nations from buying and selling. If you were to tell individuals in love that the United States plans to impose this economic bullying system on the entire earth, they would probably just yawn in your face, laugh at you, or just completely lock you off and shut down. One of the only groups of people who would be able to survive this global economic embargo are cultures and communities who are off the grid and live and survive in nature, completely off the land that they currently occupy, which is the original divine mandate that was set up for mankind. But for most of us who are integrated into this global digital system, who haven't got the foggiest idea about agriculture and living off the natural land, how would we survive? Just say that all social privileges were stripped and they decided to turn off your gas, your running water, your electricity, and your access to the internet. Stop and think for a second. How would you survive? It is often said that it is in a crisis where true characters are revealed. And if a global law was to be passed where all these social privileges were taken away from you, you will see who you really are, who are your true friends, and how real your family copes under global pressure. One man who was definitely woke, who was streetwise by becoming all things to all men that he could reach them, knew that if such a law was passed, some call it the New World Order, others call it the Mark of the Beast, it would be ushered in with such stealth that you wouldn't be able to be aware of what's happening. And 2 centuries ago, Dr. James Aiken Wiley said, "Tyranny, that is cruel and oppressive despotic government rule, comes with a muffled foot, quietly and secretly. It steals upon us like the night. It deposits while a nation sleeps the seeds of arbitrary or autocratic rule, and under pretense of redressing wrong or of advancing liberty, it strikes, when you least expect it, a fatal blow at justice and freedom."
Today, if you say the wrong thing, think a different thought. You must be silenced.
There are many who are concerned for the environment and the effects of geoengineering, and they feel powerless. The narrator can help you to start on how to understand the true mechanics of the environment. But ask now the beasts, and they shall teach thee, and the fowls of the air, and they shall tell thee. Or speak to the earth, and it shall teach thee, and the fishes of the sea shall declare unto thee, who know that in all these that the hand of the Lord hath wrought this.
Are you now woke? And do you have a clear understanding of what geoengineering is? And do you realize that if you do not understand the past, you can't make sense of the present? And as I encourage at all times, everything you've seen in this study and all the previous studies of Even at the Doors, please go and research everything for yourself. I just want to say a big thank you for all of those who have supported Even at the Doors through finances. I really want to say thank you because it has helped this video to go forward. And if you want to continue supporting Even at the Doors, please click on the link below. Thank you.